Today we are joined by Nitish Agrawal, the founder of the Last Vulture, a conservation tourism initiative focusing on vulture conservation. The Last Vulture organizes guided vulture walking safaris, educating guests about these crucial scavengers. Beyond tourism, the initiative works closely with nearby villages, running continuous awareness and outreach programs that engage local communities and place them at the heart of conservation efforts. From guided vulture walking safaris and long-term research and monitoring to community-led conservation and sustainable livelihoods, this approach ensures that tourism becomes a force for conservation rather than a threat to it. Tune in to learn how saving vultures can also transform landscapes, livelihoods, and mindsets. Welcome, Nitish, to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Anish, for inviting me to be your guest for this podcast.
So, what got you interested into conservation?
So, I actually saw my first vulture quite recently in 2021. And from that side of vulture is quite in my memories till now. And because I used to observe birds since it's been like 14 years, I've been observing birds and photographing birds. So now with vultures, what started with as you can say first time sighting, it converted as a research topic for me because it was quite uncommon to see vultures in current times. So I started researching about vultures and got to know that it's been quite a decline in population since last 2 decades. And even in 2021, the population was still on decline. So I started observing vultures in the area where I actually sighted them and saw significant, and you can not say significant, but a good number rise in their population, which actually interested me in knowing more about those birds. And then actually I proceeded into conservation, which was never meant for me because I'm primarily focusing on photography and observations, but somehow I converted into conservation.
And talk about the Last Vulture. How did this come into being, and what is your vision with the Last Vulture?
So the idea of Last Vulture it originated from the word actually looks quite negative, but the Last Vulture, I put this name in two senses. First is, if we are not going to conserve the vultures, then these are going to be the last vultures. But if we are good to go with these, then this is the last vulture that we are going to conserve. So there are two ideologies with the Last Vulture, and the Last Vulture is primarily focusing on walking safaris related to, you can say, primarily focusing on vultures and their ecosystem and how the ecosystem work around vultures. So the Last Vulture came into being like 2 years ago, and it is a partnership firm of me. Like, I am the founder, and my fiance Shruti Pandey is co-founder. So we are both managing the Last Vulture thing.
So, why do you think it is necessary to educate people about vultures?
So in last 2 decades, if I mention that there have been a huge loss in vulture population. In percentage, if I say like 3 species, specifically white-rump vultures, long-billed vultures, and slender-billed vultures, have lost their more than 97% of population. It's a quite significant number that we have lost in last like 2 decades. Vultures are primarily scavengers. They don't hunt. And because of the sheer numbers of their population in India before the crash, the carcasses that were left in open were finished within, I would say, an hour maximum. So vultures basically are a cleanup crew, natural cleanup crew, which are saving millions of money of government and sanitation workers. And they're also saving us from multitude of diseases, I would say, because we just know 2 or 3 diseases which can spread through these rotting carcasses. But we don't know how many more diseases are thriving on these carcasses. So vultures are actually saving humanity from another crisis like COVID that could happen very soon if vultures are not conserved. And also saving millions of dollars of government on sanitation and carcass disposal thing.
So, what led to the crash in vulture populations?
So the primary crash was due to diclofenac. So basically, diclofenac is an non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, which was used on cattle who are suffering from severe pain and after, like you can say, after surgery or any injury. So this diclofenac used to be administered to these cattle across India because it was a cheaper option and it was introduced in like 1990s or 1992 in India. And since then, this medicine gained quite, I can say, market in India because it was cheap and easy to administer. But unfortunately, this drug requires at least 10 to 14 days to eject out of these cattle. But if the cattle dies within this time frame, so we don't had any specific, you can say, carcass disposal system. The disposal system was to just throw the carcasses in open and vultures used to feed on them. So what happened is this drug actually caused renal failure in most of the vultures, and this was the primary poisoning that was happening from diclofenac infected carcasses. So main population dropped because of the diclofenac. And later on, because vultures number were declining and there were not sufficient vultures in many areas. So what the not carcass actually, the cattle owners started doing was burying those carcasses. So it increased the exponential loss of these vultures because first of all, they were dying of diclofenac and secondly, they were not getting enough food. So these two were the primary reasons of their decline in last 2 decades.
So, you spoke about the ecological and public health concerns of the. Okay, sorry. Since you mentioned, I'll skip the next question. So, India has been making significant efforts to captively breed vultures and release them back to the wild. Talk about these projects. How successful have these reintroduction projects been in India?
So currently, I am actually not the right person right now to state how is it successful or not because we are lack of data. We don't have data about how many vultures are captively bred, how many of vultures are released. And the primary thing right now is we are still in 2025 standing at a place where we don't have any vulture safe zone. So even if vulture conservation breeding centers are successful in breeding vultures, they don't have any safe areas where they can actually release those captive bred vultures. So the only site that I know about is in Assam. Its name is Majuli. And interestingly, vultures have died of poisoning in that vulture safe zone. So we don't can actually state right now that vulture safe zones are there in it. But with conservation breeding centers, I visited a few, and the breeding program is going good, but the release program is still in, I would say, in stagnation, because it is not able to convince authorities, because they are not having vulture safe zones. So it would be lame to release those vultures in any area where we don't have vigilance on medicines, on safe carcass disposal systems, and things like that.
So, what else do you think needs to be done to conserve vultures in India?
So actually, India is such a diverse country with terrains and with vegetation. We can't implement a single conservation method all across India. But interestingly, today, what vulture need is their nesting success rate should be good, and they need food for that. So if we ensure to give food to them, then we can actually ensure good success rates of nesting, and you can also say good fledgling success rate as well, which can actually become adult and then start breeding. So because vultures are quite slow breeding birds, and they only lay one egg per year, so the decline can be drastic, but the increase would not be, you can say, exponential. It will be very linear for, like I would say, 10 to 15 years. We are able to conserve the vultures that we have currently. Post that, we can expect exponential growth. So currently, we need to ensure food stations for them. And this is what we are actually also doing in our area to ensure the vultures get quite ample of amount of food.
So, how are local communities contributing to vulture conservation and the conservation of broader bird communities?
So working with local communities is very exciting and interesting, because I actually got to know a lot about these birds from local communities, their nesting, their behavior, their movement patterns, and villages, because they rely on these birds and their calls, because they venture into forest for many things. So they actually have a very good idea about the diversity that is present there. And involving these communities is critical, because if these birds are suffering or declining in those areas, the first effect will be on these villages. So they know, and there are a lot of myths that are going around in villages. So these myths are actually, I would say, they are quite positive. They're in quite a positive way to conserve these birds, because they are they don't hunt these birds, because they treat them as the chariots of gods. So they don't hunt, and they're also focusing on many mammal species, bird species, reptiles, and there's several myths going on, but these myths are actually helping them to conserve these birds and ecosystem. So these communities are primary, I would say, partners of our focus, our work, and they are the ones that are actually carrying this work ahead.
So, talking about the walking safaris provided by the Last Vulture.
So the Last Vulture is primarily focusing on these walking safari initiatives, in which we are focusing not just on vultures, but on a broader ecosystem in a slow and immersive experience. So we have these 4 days, 3 night safaris, where we will be staying in homestays, which will be close to villages, and we will be walking inside, you can say, the forest and fringes of villages. So these safaris are organized outside protected areas. These are not inside protected areas. And these will be led by the local community people. which will be our primary naturalist, and I will be there to assist them. So these walking safaris are focusing on walking into forest, watching vultures, watching scavenging mammals, reptiles, plant species. Then there are huge waterfalls, like one of the highest waterfalls of Madhya Pradesh is in Ziva region. So there are multiple waterfalls. There are at least 22 species of raptors that we have documented till now, and more than 130 species of birds that thrive here. More than 6 species of mammals are there. So our safaris are primarily focusing on walking into forest with a slow, immersive experience to observe each and everything. Because in traditional safaris, we are rushing to get good photos, a tiger sighting, and all those things. So we are trying to convert this conventional safaris into some unconventional walking safari things to observe these long lost birds, because they are these, like tiger is an apex predator in carnivores. So these raptor birds and vultures are, you can say, the apex predators in birds, and they need the most conservation. I would say they need the most conservation right now. So in safaris, we also focus on astrophotography and learning about post processing, and we will also interact with local communities. We will enjoy the local Bagheli cuisines that are there. And because Riva is the first place where the white tiger was caught, so there are museums which actually have a good history about that place, and historical monuments are there. So basically, this is kind of an immersive experience of culture, history, wildlife, and astrophotography and night observation. It's quite a package that we are summing up. And these safaris starting from November onwards till they will be till February.
And then how can individuals contribute to the Last Vulture and vulture conservation more broadly?
So we actually run several campaigns. We are not an NGO, but we run several campaigns on our own, which includes safe disposal of these safe carcasses, or monitoring of birds, monitoring of vultures. So these monitoring is totally done by the local community members. And we are trying to gather an asset that will be of greater use, a data that we can actually analyze and understand how different bird species are going in this landscape. So we are currently not funded by any agencies or any NGOs or any grants. So we are running several campaigns for monitoring, for carcass disposal. So they can contribute, everyone can actually contribute directly to us, and we will be showing them all the work that we are doing. And secondly, the best way to contribute to our work is to join us on this walking safaris, because the profits that we make from these safaris, 20% of the profits is directly going into conservation right away. And these will be sufficient, not actually sufficient, but keep this conservation work going, because it is much needed in this area.
And what have been some of your most prominent challenges and best memories from your conservation career so far?
So one of the most prominent challenges is financial things, to manage finances right now, because all the things that are currently we are doing is on our own funds and from family funds, like and it is quite limited. So it is just out of passion that actually into conservation. And the thing is, because we are focusing on vultures, so, and many people are focusing on vultures currently, but they don't have any outline to how to work on vultures, what to do. And people are, because people are aware of what we do, people are trying to steal our work, trying to present the work that we have done as theirs, and gaining grants from many reputed organizations. I won't mention the names, but it is happening and it has happened. So I'm just trying to mention, and because we are not focusing on these things right now, so people are trying to steal those things from us. But major thing is, the major challenge is the finances and getting together with the communities. It is quite difficult to get together with communities because they have their own traditions, they have their own ideology about the person who is not from that village. It is quite difficult to convince them, but luckily we have done that work, and the work is going on good. And we need actually more funds to run this and run this actually campaign and make it successful. And the best memories are actually every day whenever I'm on field. It's something new happening, something interesting that is keeping me involved in this work. So I just remember one of the day when I and my fiance were on the field, and we were observing vultures and counting their numbers. It was September of 2024, and that was her first day on the field, and we saw more than 130 vultures that day. And one of the best memories that I had was we saw actually a red-headed family. So there was a male, a female, and a newborn, I will say juvenile, this generation juvenile, feeding on a bone marrow. So that sighting was quite, I would say, in my memory and in hers memory, that we can't forget. But still, every day is a best day whenever I was feeding.
Yeah, red-headed vultures are quite rare to see in jungle. So that is a fun question, right, you? Thank you so much for taking time out to this.
Thank you, Ali.